I stared at the gilded invitation to Louise's 60th birthday gala, my name conspicuously crossed out with a single pen stroke. Next to me, my husband Teddy shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to meet my eyes. "It must be a mistake," he mumbled unconvincingly. We both knew it wasn't. The ornate envelope had arrived that morning, addressed only to Teddy. Inside, the heavy cardstock invitation announced, "The Diamond Anniversary Celebration of Louise Montgomery," in elegant calligraphy. A personal note was paperclipped to the corner. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Teddy darling, we're keeping this intimate, just family. I'm sure Becca will understand. Love, Mother. I'd been married to Teddy for 3 years, but in Louise's eyes, I was still an outsider. An interloper who had stolen her precious son from the future she'd carefully planned for him. The exclusion from her milestone birthday wasn't surprising, but the brazenness of it, the crossed-out name, the pointed note, that was new. "You should still go," I told Teddy, working to keep my voice steady. "It's your mother's 60th. It's important." Teddy ran his hand through his dark hair, a gesture I recognized as his response to stress. "We're a package deal, Becca. If you're not invited, I'm not going." I almost believed him. Almost. But 3 years of marriage had taught me that when it came to standing up to his mother, Teddy's resolve inevitably crumbled. "Let me call her," he offered, reaching for his phone. "There's probably a misunderstanding." I bit back a bitter laugh. There was no misunderstanding. Louise Montgomery had been crystal clear about her feelings toward me from the moment Teddy had introduced us. I wasn't from the right family. I hadn't attended the right schools. My career as an event planner was quaint compared to the corporate lawyers and doctors she'd envisioned her son marrying. The fact that I'd built my business from scratch, turning a passion for organization into one of the most sought-after event planning agencies in the city, meant nothing to her. In her world, success was inherited, not earned. I watched as Teddy stepped onto the balcony of our apartment to make the call, his shoulders already tensing for the conversation ahead. Through the glass door, I could see his expression shift, from determined to defensive to defeated in the span of minutes. When he returned, his face told me everything I needed to know. "She says the venue has limited capacity," he explained, not meeting my eyes. "Just family and a few close friends. He hesitated. "She's concerned that having you there might create tension." "Create tension," I repeated flatly. "Because my presence at family gatherings has been so disruptive in the past?" Teddy winced. We both knew the opposite was true. I'd spent 3 years bending over backward to accommodate Louise's thinly veiled hostility. I'd endured her helpful critiques of everything from my cooking to my wardrobe choices. I'd smiled through holiday dinners where she'd reminisced about Teddy's ex-girlfriend Maddie, who was now doing so well as a pediatric surgeon. I'd remained polite when she'd accidentally excluded me from family photos, and Teddy, for all his promises to stand up for me, inevitably found reasons to keep the peace. "She's from a different generation," he would explain. Or, "She didn't mean it that way." Or, most frustratingly, "She'll come around eventually." 3 years in, I was still waiting for eventually to arrive. "So, what are you going to do?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Teddy sighed, looking miserable. "It's her 60th, Becca. It's a milestone. I can't just not go." "But you can just let her exclude your wife?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "It's one evening," he pleaded. "I'll go for a couple of hours, make an appearance, and leave early. I'll tell her this isn't acceptable." "Like you told her last Christmas? And at your sister's wedding? And your brother's graduation?" Each instance hung between us, promises made and broken. Teddy's phone buzzed with a text. He glanced down, then quickly away, but not before I caught the name on the screen. Dominique, his younger sister. What does Dominique have to say about all this? I asked. Nothing, he answered too quickly. Just confirming some details about the party. I held out my hand. After a moment's hesitation, he handed me the phone. The text read, "Mom says it's all settled. Becca understands she's not invited. We're still on for the final planning meeting tomorrow, right? 2 p.m. at the Bellamy Hotel." The Bellamy Hotel, one of the most exclusive venues in the city, known for its crystal chandeliers, historic ballroom, and 6-month waiting list. Except I knew for a fact that the Bellamy was booked solid for the next 8 months, because I'd tried to secure it for a client just last week and been told nothing was available. Which meant Louise had been planning this intimate family gathering for quite some time, long enough to book one of the most sought-after venues in the city, long enough to ensure I wouldn't be part of it. "The Bellamy," I said, handing the phone back to Teddy. "Interesting choice." "What do you mean?" "Nothing. Just that for an intimate family gathering, your mother has selected a 300-person ballroom." Teddy frowned. "It can't be the main ballroom. It must be one of the smaller event spaces. The Bellamy doesn't have smaller event spaces. It's the grand ballroom or nothing. That's their whole appeal." I could see the realization dawning on him, followed quickly by the familiar discomfort that arose whenever he was caught between his mother's deceptions and the truth. "I'm sure there's an explanation," he said weakly. I stood up, suddenly tired of the same old pattern. "Of course there is. Your mother is throwing a massive 60th birthday gala, and specifically excluding your wife, and you're going to go anyway." As I walked toward our bedroom, Teddy called after me. "Becca, please. What am I supposed to do?" I paused in the doorway, not turning around. For once in your life, Teddy, you could choose me. But I knew he wouldn't. And as I closed the bedroom door behind me, something shifted inside me. A resolve I hadn't felt before. Because this time, I wasn't going to play the role of the patient, understanding wife. This time, I had information Louise didn't know I possessed. And as one of the city's premier event planners, I had connections that Louise couldn't even imagine. If she wanted to exclude me from her birthday celebration, that was her choice. But choices, as Louise Montgomery was about to learn, have consequences. Louise Montgomery had built her life around appearances, control, and social hierarchy. At 59, nearly 60, as she preferred to say with practiced modesty, she had perfected the art of wielding influence while appearing benevolent. I'd first met her 3 years ago at the Montgomery family's Thanksgiving dinner. Teddy had been nervous, fidgeting with his collar as we'd approached the sprawling colonial house in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. "She's going to love you," he'd promised, squeezing my hand. How could she not? Louise had opened the door herself, immaculately dressed in a cashmere sweater and pearls, her silver blonde hair swept into an elegant updo. Her smile had frozen. When she'd seen me, "Theodore," she'd said, using his full name as she embraced him, "and you must be Rebecca." "Becca," I'd corrected warmly, extending my hand. She'd taken it with cool fingers, her grip brief and dismissive. "We use full names in this family. Nicknames are for children and pets." That first dinner had set the pattern for our relationship. Every interaction carefully orchestrated to remind me of my place, or rather my lack of one, in the Montgomery family hierarchy. Louise's arsenal included pointed questions about my modest upbringing, comments about how brave it was to start a small business without a proper education. I had a business degree from a state university, which apparently didn't count, and constant references to Maddie, Teddy's college girlfriend who had fulfilled Louise's dream by becoming a doctor. "Did you know Madeline just published her second research paper?" she would ask the table at large, though her eyes would fix on me. "And to think, Theodore, she was practically part of the family for years." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Now, as I emerged from our bedroom, the morning after receiving the birthday invitation, I found Teddy on the phone again, his voice low and conciliatory. "Yes, Mother, I understand. Of course it's your special day. You should celebrate however makes you happy." I poured myself coffee, making no effort to hide my presence. Teddy glanced up, his expression caught between guilt and resignation. "I should go," he said into the phone. "Becca and I need to talk." "Yes, I'll let you know." "Love you too." He set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. "She's concerned you're upset." "I'm not upset," I replied, stirring my coffee. "I'm seeing things clearly for the first time." Teddy frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done pretending your mother will ever accept me, and I'm done watching you fail to stand up for our marriage." His face flushed. "That's not fair. You know how complicated she is." "She's not complicated, Teddy. She's a bully who's used to getting her way. She's still my mother, and I'm your wife." I set my mug down with deliberate care. "But that seems to matter less." Teddy ran his hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar I could predict it before it happened. "What do you want me to do, Becca? Cut her off? She's family." "So, am I? Or at least, I'm supposed to be." My phone buzzed with an incoming call. I glanced at the screen. Marcus Lawton, the general manager of the Bellamy Hotel and a client whose daughter's wedding I'd planned last year. I excused myself to take the call in the study. "Becca, good morning." Marcus's warm voice greeted me. "Hope I'm not calling too early." "Not at all. What can I do for you?" "Actually, it's what I might be able to do for you. I've just had a somewhat unusual request cross my desk regarding an event at the Bellamy. A 60th birthday celebration for a Mrs. Louise Montgomery." I kept my voice neutral. "Oh?" "Yes. Apparently, she's requesting some last-minute changes to the guest list and seating arrangements. Nothing unusual there, but..." He hesitated. "Your name came up specifically as someone who should be denied entry, even if accompanying her son. Security was instructed to be on alert. The coldness of it hit me harder than I expected. Being excluded from an invitation was one thing. Actively planning to have me removed if I dared to show up was another level entirely." "I see," I managed. "I found it odd, given that you're one of our most valued event partners. I wanted to check if there was some misunderstanding before proceeding with such instructions." I closed my eyes, centering myself. "No misunderstanding, Marcus. Louise Montgomery is my mother-in-law, and we have a complicated relationship." "Ah." His tone conveyed immediate understanding. "Well, that explains it, though I must say barring someone from entry seems extreme for family friction." "Louise specializes in extreme," I replied. "But I appreciate the heads up." After assuring Marcus I wasn't offended by his call, I ended the conversation and sat motionless at my desk. The magnitude of Louise's hostility had reached new heights. She hadn't just excluded me. She'd planned for the possibility of me showing up anyway, and had taken steps to ensure I would be publicly humiliated if I tried. I opened my laptop and pulled up my client database, not to check appointments or review contracts, but to examine one particular entry. The Bellamy Hotel, with its detailed contact information, contract terms, and, most importantly, cancellation policies. As one of the city's top event planners, I had cultivated relationships with every premium venue, including exclusive access to last-minute openings and flexibility with bookings that normal clients couldn't obtain. Louise had no idea that her chosen venue considered me a valued partner, not just another customer. I picked up my phone and dialed. "Alex? It's Becca. Remember that favor you owe me? I think it's time to collect." Alex Rivera, the executive chef at the Bellamy's renowned restaurant, laughed. "I was wondering when you'd call that in. After you saved my New Year's Eve service. Last year, I'm pretty much at your disposal. What do you need?" I took a deep breath. information about an upcoming event, and possibly some creative scheduling. As I hung up 20 minutes later, the outlines of a plan were forming in my mind. Louise Montgomery had spent a lifetime cultivating the perfect image, the perfect control over her family, the perfect social standing, but she had never faced an opponent who understood the mechanics of that perfection from the inside, and she had certainly never imagined that her excluded daughter-in-law might have the power to unravel it all with a few phone calls. That evening, I sat at our dining table surrounded by my planning materials, my laptop, notebook, and the phone that hadn't stopped buzzing with responses to the calls I'd made earlier. Teddy entered cautiously, eyeing the spread before me. "Working late?" he asked, setting down his briefcase. He'd left for the office shortly after our morning conversation, citing an important meeting that couldn't be rescheduled. "Just organizing some thoughts," I replied, closing my notebook as he approached. Teddy poured himself a glass of water, studying me over the rim. "You've been quiet all day. Are you still upset about my mother's party?" I considered my words carefully. Teddy had always been caught in the middle of the tension between his mother and me. Pushing him to choose sides had never worked. He inevitably retreated into placating both of us while satisfying neither. A different approach was needed. "I've been thinking," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Your mother clearly wants a family-only celebration. I should respect that." Relief flooded his features. "Really? That's great, Becca. I know this hasn't been easy." "You should go," I continued. "Enjoy the evening with your family. I'm sure it will be lovely." Teddy approached, resting his hands on my shoulders. "Thank you for understanding. It's just one night, and it would mean a lot to her." I smiled up at him, covering his hand with mine. "I know how important family is to you." He hesitated, sensing something in my tone. "You're my family too, Becca. The most important part." "Am I?" The question hung between us, not accusatory, but genuinely curious. Teddy knelt beside my chair, taking my hands in his. "Of course you are. I love you. My mother is complicated, set in her ways, but that doesn't change how I feel about you." I studied his earnest face, seeing both the man I'd fallen in love with and the boy still seeking his mother's approval. "I believe you love me, Teddy. I've never doubted that. But I've spent 3 years watching you choose peace with your mother over standing up for me." "That's not fair, isn't it? When she forgot to invite my parents to our engagement dinner, you said it was an oversight. When she seated me at the far end of the table at Christmas, away from you, it was just the traditional seating arrangement. When she introduced me as Teddy's friend to her social circle last summer, you laughed it off as Mom being old-fashioned." His face fell. "I didn't want to create conflict." "I know. But your avoidance of conflict with her created constant conflict in our marriage." I squeezed his hands gently. "I'm not asking you to cut ties with your mother. I'm asking you to recognize the pattern we're stuck in." Teddy was silent for a long moment. "What do you want me to do?" he finally asked. "Nothing," I said, surprising him. "Go to her birthday. Celebrate with your family. But when you come home, we need to have a real conversation about boundaries going forward." He nodded slowly, relief mixing with wariness in his expression. He knew me well enough to sense I wasn't simply surrendering, but he couldn't quite identify what had changed. Later that night, after Teddy had fallen asleep, I returned to the dining room and reopened my notebook. The list of calls I'd made today had yielded more information than I'd anticipated. The Bellamy Hotel, Marcus, Louise's deposit was substantial but refundable up to 2 weeks before the event. The event was coded as a private family celebration, with an expected guest count of 150, not the intimate gathering she'd claimed, elite catering, Alex. The menu was extravagant, featuring imported delicacies and premium champagne. Louise had specifically requested Alex himself oversee the kitchen, something usually reserved for celebrities and political figures. Dominique Montgomery, Teddy's sister, Our relationship had always been cordial but distant. My call had surprised. Her? Becca? Her voice had been uncertain. Is everything okay? Just checking in, I'd replied casually. Teddy mentioned you're helping with your mother's birthday planning. A pause. Yes, though helping might be generous. Mom has very specific ideas. I'm sure. The Bellamy is a beautiful choice. Another, longer pause. I'm sorry about the invitation situation. I told Mom it was ridiculous to exclude you, but you know how she gets when she's made up her mind. This had been unexpected. A small crack in the Montgomery family's united front. I appreciate that, Dominique. I'm not calling to make things awkward for you. I just wanted to understand what happened. Dominique had sighed heavily. Mom's throwing this massive party with practically everyone she's ever met. The family only excuse is complete nonsense. Half the country club is coming, plus Dad's business associates and even Mom's college roommates. I see. It's embarrassing, honestly. Kyle thinks so too. Kyle, Dominique's husband of 5 years, had always been friendly to me. Mom's been impossible lately, micromanaging everything. The centerpieces aren't gold enough. The menu isn't exclusive enough. The band isn't prestigious enough. Sounds stressful. It is. And expensive. Dad nearly had a heart attack when he saw the initial quotes. That's actually why I'm involved, trying to keep things from completely derailing the family budget. This information had been illuminating. Louise's extravagance was apparently straining even the Montgomerys' considerable resources. Bellamy. Event staff. Jamie. As a frequent client of the hotel, I had good relationships with the service staff. Jamie, the head of event coordination, had confirmed that Louise had been difficult during planning meetings, repeatedly changing requirements and speaking condescendingly to staff. Between us, Jamie had confided, we've started drawing straws to see who has to handle her site visits. No one wants to be on the receiving end of another lecture about how the Andersons' daughter's wedding had better flowers. This last piece was particularly valuable. Louise's carefully cultivated image of gracious sophistication apparently didn't extend to those she considered beneath her social standing. I made one final call before closing my notebook for the night. Maddie, it's Becca, Teddy's wife. Becca? The surprise in her voice was evident. Is everything okay? Is Teddy? He's fine, I assured her. I'm calling about something else entirely. I've heard so much about you over the years. I feel like we should finally meet. The conversation that followed lasted nearly an hour and revealed the most surprising alliance of all. Maddie, the perfect doctor Louise couldn't stop praising, had her own complicated history with the Montgomery matriarch, one that would prove invaluable in the days ahead. As I finally climbed into bed beside my sleeping husband, I felt surprisingly calm. The hurt and anger of being excluded hadn't disappeared, but they had transformed into something more productive. Determination. Louise had spent years trying to make me feel small and insignificant, but in her eagerness to humiliate me, she had overlooked one critical detail. Event planning wasn't just my career, it was my battlefield. And she had just declared war on home turf. I'd never planned to fall in love with Theodore Montgomery. When we first met at a charity auction 4 years ago, I was there strictly for business, managing the event for a client while Teddy had been dragged along by his father, a major donor. You look as thrilled to be here as I feel, he'd said, approaching me at the bar where I was reviewing my checklist. At least you can leave when you want, I'd replied, not looking up. I'm stuck, until the last drunk socialite calls their car service. He'd laughed, a genuine laugh, not the practiced chuckle I'd been hearing all evening from the donor crowd. Fair point. Can I at least buy you a drink while you're imprisoned here? I'd finally looked up then, taking in his kind eyes and the slight dishevelment of his tie, a small rebellion against the formal atmosphere. I don't drink during events. Professional hazard. Coffee, then? There's a shop across the street that stays open late. I can't leave. I'm working. Then. His persistence had been charming rather than annoying. When the last drunk socialite has been safely delivered home. Against my better judgment, I'd agreed. That late-night coffee had turned into breakfast, which had turned into dinner the following weekend. Teddy wasn't like the other men I'd dated. He was thoughtful, funny, and refreshingly direct. He asked questions about my business and actually listened to the answers. He respected my work schedule and never complained when emergencies pulled me away from dates. Within 6 months, we were serious. Within a year, we were discussing marriage, and that's when Louise Montgomery had entered the picture. You need to understand, Teddy had explained before I met his family. My mother has very specific ideas about how things should be done, about who I should be. And I don't fit those ideas, I'd guessed. He'd hesitated just long enough for me to know I was right. She'll come around once she gets to know you. But Louise had never intended to get to know me. From that first Thanksgiving. Dinner, she'd made her assessment. I was unsuitable, an error in judgment that Teddy would eventually correct. Her strategy had been clear. Tolerate my presence while making it as uncomfortable as possible, waiting for the relationship to crumble under the strain. When we'd announced our engagement 6 months later, Louise had smiled thinly and said, "How impulsive. Are you sure you've given this enough thought, Theodore?" The wedding planning had been a battleground. Louise had pushed for a lavish church ceremony with hundreds of guests, most of whom would have been her friends and connections. I'd wanted something smaller, more personal. Teddy had tried to mediate, suggesting compromises that left neither of us satisfied. In the end, we'd eloped. Not out of passion or romantic impulse, but from sheer exhaustion with the conflict. We'd flown to Hawaii, married on the beach with only a local photographer as witness, and returned to face Louise's icy disapproval. "Well," she'd said when we shared the news, "I suppose it's done now." That pattern had continued through 3 years of marriage. Every holiday, every family gathering became an exercise in endurance. Louise would ignore me, then speak around me, then eventually launch subtle digs disguised as innocent observations or helpful advice. "Your business must keep you so busy, Rebecca," she'd say. "It's admirable that Theodore doesn't mind having a wife who prioritizes work over home." Or, "That's a lovely dress. So practical to choose something that can be worn multiple times rather than investing in variety." Each barb designed to undermine, to remind me of my outsider status. And each time Teddy would wince but say nothing in the moment, only to assure me later that "Mom didn't mean it that way," or "It will get better with time." But it never did. If anything, Louise grew bolder as she realized there would be no consequences for her behavior. The real issue wasn't just Louise's disapproval. I could have lived with that. It was Teddy's response to it. His resistance to conflict meant he perpetually sought middle ground where none existed. He wanted everyone to get along without addressing the fundamental problem, his mother's determination to drive a wedge between us. Last Christmas had been the breaking point of my patience. Louise had accidentally scheduled the family photo session for when I was picking up my parents from the airport, a task she knew I couldn't delegate. When I'd arrived with my parents, the formal portraits were complete, printed copies already ordered. "Such unfortunate timing," Louise had said with false sympathy. But the photographer couldn't possibly stay any longer. Perhaps next year. My father, seeing my hurt, had pulled out his camera. "We'll take our own family photo," he'd announced cheerfully. "Becca, Teddy, come stand by the tree." Louise had immediately objected. "Oh, we couldn't possibly redo everything. The lighting was specifically arranged earlier." "Not redoing anything," my father had replied, his tone pleasant but firm. "Just capturing my family. Surely you understand wanting pictures of your children." For a moment, Louise had looked genuinely startled at being challenged. She'd glanced at Teddy, clearly expecting him to intervene on her behalf. And Teddy, caught between his mother and my father, had frozen. "It's fine," I'd said quickly, diffusing the tension. "We don't need more photos." Later that night, I'd confronted Teddy about his silence. "You let her exclude me from the family Christmas card, and you said nothing." "It wasn't intentional, Becca. The photographer really couldn't stay." "The photographer was her neighbor's son who lives 5 minutes away." Teddy had sighed, running his hand through his hair. "What do you want me to do? Call her a liar to her face at Christmas dinner? I want you to acknowledge what she's doing instead of making excuses for her." He'd promised to speak with her after the holidays, to set boundaries, to make it clear that I was his wife and deserved respect. But just like every time before, the conversation had been postponed, then forgotten, then dismissed as unnecessary when things temporarily improved. Now, faced with this birthday invitation, this deliberate, unmistakable exclusion, I recognized the culmination of a pattern that had been building for years. Louise had finally stopped pretending, confident that Teddy would once again choose peace over confrontation, and perhaps even more telling was my own reaction. The hurt was still there, but dimmer now, overshadowed by a cold clarity. This wasn't just about a party. This was about the future of my marriage. About whether Teddy and I could build a life together that wasn't controlled by his mother's manipulation. As I reviewed my notes from the day's calls, I wasn't plotting simple revenge. I was fighting for my marriage, even if Teddy didn't yet realize it needed fighting for. My phone buzzed with a text from Maddie. "Just confirmed what you asked. Louise definitely doesn't know. This could change everything." I smiled, sending back a quick thanks. The pieces were falling into place. Louise had spent years crafting the perfect image, the perfect control over her family. She'd never imagined that her excluded daughter-in-law would have the resources, and now the motivation, to dismantle it all. For the first time since receiving that crossed-out invitation, I felt a sense of purpose. Tomorrow, I would begin implementing my plan. And Louise Montgomery's perfect birthday celebration would never be the same. The next morning, I lingered over breakfast, watching Teddy rush through his routine. He had a meeting with the planning committee for Louise's birthday, another obligation he couldn't avoid. "I'll probably be late tonight," he said, gulping coffee. "Dominique wants to finalize the slideshow, and Mother needs help with the seating chart." "No problem," I replied easily. "I have a few appointments myself." He paused, Ty half nodded. "You seem different. Yesterday you were upset, now you're almost cheerful." I shrugged. "I've had time to think. Life's too short to dwell on things. I can't change." Teddy studied me for a moment, clearly torn between relief and suspicion. Relief won out. It was easier to believe I'd made peace with the situation than to question what else might be happening. "I'm glad," he said, kissing me, quickly. "I hate being caught in the middle." "I know you do." The words came out softer than I intended, tinged with an understanding that surprised even me. Teddy had spent his entire life navigating his mother's expectations. That didn't excuse his failure to stand up for me, but it explained his reluctance to rock the boat. After Teddy left, I made my first call of the day. "Kyle? It's Becca. I was hoping we could meet for coffee." Kyle Richardson, Dominique's husband of 5 years, had always been friendly toward me, perhaps because he understood what it was like to marry into the Montgomery family. As another outsider, he'd faced his own version of Louise's scrutiny. Though as a successful attorney from a respected family, he'd eventually earned her grudging acceptance. "Just us?" he asked, sounding surprised. "Is everything okay with you and Teddy?" "Everything's fine," I assured him. "I just need some insight that only another in-law might provide." We met at a quiet cafe downtown, far from both our offices, and any Montgomery family haunts. Kyle arrived right on time, handsome in his tailored suit, looking every bit the successful attorney Louise approved of. "This is unexpected," he said as we settled with our coffees. But not unwelcome. How are you holding up with all the birthday drama? You've heard about the invitation situation. He grimaced. Dominique was furious. She argued with Louise for almost an hour, but you know how that goes. This was new information. I'd known from our call that Dominique disapproved, but not that. She'd actively challenged her mother. I didn't realize she'd stood up for me. Kyle looked surprised. Of course she did. Dominique likes you. We both do. The way Louise treats you is embarrassing for the whole family. I sipped my coffee, absorbing this. Does Teddy know Dominique confronted Louise? Probably not. You know how they all communicate. Or don't, rather. Louise would never admit someone questioned her decision, and Dominique wouldn't want to put Teddy in an awkward position. The dysfunctional family dynamics never ceased to amaze me. This bizarre dance of avoidance disguised as consideration. Kyle, can I ask you something frankly? I set down my cup. How did you navigate this family when you first married Dominique? He laughed, though there was little humor in it. Badly at first. I tried to please Louise, which is a losing game. Then I tried fighting every battle, which just exhausted Dominique and me. So, what changed? I realized I wasn't marrying the whole Montgomery clan. I was marrying Dominique. And once we established that our marriage was our priority, everything else fell into place. He leaned forward. Don't get me wrong. Louise still tries her manipulations, but they don't work because Dominique and I are a united front. That's what Teddy and I are missing, I said quietly. Kyle nodded sympathetically. Teddy has always been the family peacekeeper. Even as kids, he was the one soothing Louise's ruffled feathers, mediating between Dominique and their mother, making sure everyone was happy. At his own expense? Exactly. And now at yours. Kyle hesitated. Becca, what's really going on? I know you didn't invite me for coffee just to discuss family dynamics. I studied him for a moment, making a decision. What do you know about the birthday plans? Too much, he groaned. It's completely over the top. The Bellamy ballroom, custom everything, a guest list that keeps expanding. Louise is treating it like a coronation rather than a birthday. And how is Dominique handling it? She's stressed. Louise keeps changing details, demanding more extravagant touches. The budget's already twice what was originally planned, and Mr. Montgomery, Marcus Sr., is not happy. I nodded slowly. And what would happen if, hypothetically, the Bellamy suddenly became unavailable? Kyle's eyebrows shot up. Hypothetically, total meltdown. Louise has been bragging about securing the venue for months. It's half the reason for the party's timing. She wanted the Bellamy specifically. His eyes narrowed. Becca, what are you planning? Nothing definite yet, I hedged. I'm just exploring possibilities. Possibilities for what? I met his gaze directly. For showing Louise that excluding me has consequences. Kyle was silent for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he smiled. You know what? Good. Louise has had this coming for years. He hesitated. Be careful. When Louise feels threatened, she can be ruthless. I'm counting on it, I replied. My next meeting was with Marcus Lawton at the Bellamy. He welcomed me into his office with the warmth reserved for valued business partners. Becca, always a pleasure, though I admit I'm curious about this urgent meeting. I placed my portfolio on his desk. I wanted to discuss some concerns about the Montgomery event. Ah, yes. Your mother-in-law's birthday. An elaborate affair. That's putting it mildly. Marcus, I'll be direct. I have reason to believe there might be payment issues with this event. His expression turned serious. What kind of issues? According to family members involved in the planning, the budget has already doubled, creating tension with the primary financier, my father-in-law. I'm concerned about the hotel's position if the final payment becomes problematic. Marcus frowned. The deposit is secured, but the remaining balance is substantial. Has Mr. Montgomery expressed specific concerns about covering the costs? Not directly to me, I admitted, but I've heard through reliable sources that he's extremely unhappy with the expanding scope and cost. Given my relationship with the Bellamy, I felt obligated to give you a heads up. I appreciate that, Becca. This would certainly be an unfortunate situation for all involved. He tapped his pen thoughtfully. What would you suggest? I'm not suggesting anything specific, I said carefully. Just sharing information that might be relevant to your business decisions. Marcus nodded slowly, understanding the subtext. Perhaps we should review the contract terms more carefully. Sometimes these large events require additional security measures, financial security measures. That seems prudent, I agreed, especially for an event of this profile. As I left the Bellamy, my phone buzzed with a text from Alex. Menu tasting with the Montgomery party scheduled for tomorrow at 1 p.m. Still want me to proceed as discussed? Absolutely, I replied. And thank you. The final piece of my day's plan involved a visit to the offices of the city's premier society magazine, where my client and friend Janice Green served as editor-in-chief. Becca, she exclaimed, embracing me. Please tell me you're here to plan my retirement party next year. Eventually, I laughed. But today I'm here about something else. What do you know about Louise Montgomery's 60th birthday? Janice's eyes lit up with journalistic interest. Only that it's promising to be the social event of the season. Louise has been dropping hints to our society columnist for months. She studied me curiously. But you'd know more than I would, surely. Isn't she your mother-in-law? She is. And therein lies a story you might find interesting. By the time I left Janice's office an hour later, the foundations of my plan were solidly in place. As I walked to my car, I received one more text, this one from Maddie. Just confirmed availability for that weekend. Operation Birthday Surprise is a go. I smiled, a sense of calm purpose settling over me. Louise Montgomery had spent years undermining me, secure in the belief that I would continue to quietly endure her tactics for Teddy's sake. She had no idea that she'd finally pushed me to a point where I was willing to fight back, not just for my dignity, but for the future of my marriage. And she certainly never imagined that her carefully cultivated social world was about to experience a seismic shift orchestrated by the very person she'd deemed insignificant enough to cross off an invitation with a single stroke of her pen. The next day, while Teddy was at work, I paid a visit to my in-laws' house. This was unusual enough that Marcus Montgomery Sr. himself answered the door, surprise evident on his face. Rebecca, he said, using my full name as the family always did. This is unexpected. Unlike his wife, Marcus Sr. had always been cordial to me, if somewhat distant. He was a traditional man who believed family matters should be handled by the women, leaving him free to focus on his investment firm. In our limited interactions, he'd been polite, but never particularly warm. I apologize for dropping by unannounced, I said. I was hoping to speak with you privately. His eyebrows rose, but he stepped back, ushering me into the grand foyer. Louise is at her hair appointment, if that's what you mean by privately. It is, I admitted. Thank you. He led me to his study, a handsome room lined with leather-bound books and dark wood furniture. It was a masculine space, carefully insulated from Louise's influence, which dominated the rest of the house. What can I do for you? He asked, settling behind his desk. I took a seat across from him. I wanted to talk to you about Louise's birthday celebration. His expression immediately darkened. If Louise sent you to convince me about that ridiculous ice sculpture— I'm not here on Louise's behalf, I interrupted gently. Quite the opposite, actually. Marcus Sr. studied me with new interest. Go on. I understand there have been some concerns about the expanding budget for the event. He barked a short laugh. Concerns? The cost has nearly tripled since the initial proposal. Louise seems determined to bankrupt us for a single evening's entertainment. I nodded sympathetically. That must be frustrating. It's beyond frustrating. Every day there's some new essential addition. Custom linens flown in from Italy, rare orchids, vintage champagne that costs more per bottle than my first car. He shook his head. I've tried to reason with her, but you know Louise. I do, I agreed. Which is why I wanted to make you aware of something. I opened my portfolio and slid across a document, a copy of the Bellamy contract with several sections highlighted. What's this? He asked, reaching for his reading glasses. The current contract with the Bellamy Hotel includes several concerning clauses, I explained. Specifically, these cancellation penalties and damage provisions are significantly higher than industry standard. Marcus Sr. frowned as he read. This says we're liable for the full amount even if we cancel up to 2 weeks before the event. And these damage fees, they're outrageous. They are, I agreed. And there's more. The contract specifies that all vendor payments must be processed through the Bellamy's event management system, which adds a 15% processing fee to each transaction. What? His face flushed with anger. Louise never mentioned this. She might not have realized it. I kept my tone neutral. These clauses are often buried in the fine print. But you caught them. Event planning is my business. I review contracts like this regularly. Marcus Sr. removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. Why are you showing me this, Rebecca? Not that I don't appreciate it, but given the situation between you and Louise. Because despite everything, I care about this family. And I recognize that financial strain can create lasting damage. He studied me for a long moment. You're not what Louise thinks you are you? I smiled slightly. Probably not. Does Theodore know you're here? No. And I'd prefer to keep it that way. I stood, gathering my portfolio. I just thought you should have all the information before the final payments are due. Marcus Sr. looked down at the contract again. I appreciate this, Rebecca. Truly. One more thing, I added, pausing at the door. You might want to speak with the Bellamy directly about these terms. I happen to know they sometimes make exceptions for valued clients with the right more approach. As I left the Montgomery house, I felt a twinge of guilt. I hadn't lied to Marcus Sr. The contract did contain those clauses, though they were standard in the industry and not nearly as predatory as I'd implied. My suggestion that he might negotiate better terms was calculated to put pressure on the Bellamy from yet another angle. By the time I reached my car, my phone was ringing. Dominique. Dad just called a family meeting about Mom's birthday budget, she said without preamble. What did you say to him? I simply pointed out some contract clauses he might not have been aware of. Well, he's furious. Says the whole thing is financially irresponsible and needs to be scaled back immediately. She paused. Mom's going to lose her mind. That's unfortunate. I replied evenly. Dominique was silent for a moment. This is about the invitation, isn't it? You're getting back at Mom. I'm just sharing information that might be relevant to family financial decisions. Right. Her tone was skeptical, but not accusatory. Well, for what it's worth, I think Mom deserves whatever headache is coming her way. But Becca, be careful. When she realizes you're involved, she'll retaliate. I'm counting on it, I replied. My next stop was the offices of Elite Catering, where Alex greeted me warmly. The menu tasting with Mrs. Montgomery was enlightening, he said, ushering me into his private office. Enlightening how? She rejected every suggestion I made, demanded items that aren't in season, and spoke to my staff like they were servants in her personal household. He shook his head. I've dealt with difficult clients before, but she's exceptional. Did you mention the supply issues we discussed? I did. Told her the imported truffles she insists on might not arrive in time due to shipping delays. She said, and I quote, I don't accept excuses. Find a way to make it happen, or I'll find someone who will. I nodded. Exactly as expected. And the special menu options? I mentioned that we could create a beautiful alternative menu featuring local, sustainable ingredients that would actually be more exclusive and cutting edge. Alex grinned. She looked at me like I'd suggested serving fast food. Perfect. What? About the wine pairing? I told her the rare vintage she requested has become unavailable, but we could substitute with an equally impressive selection. She demanded I find the original at any cost. And will you? Alex's grin widened. I'll certainly try. But these rare wines, they're so unpredictable. Shipments get delayed, bottles arrive damaged. Anything could happen. As I left, my phone buzzed with a text from Teddy. Family dinner tonight at my parents'. Mandatory. Attendance. Something about birthday budget issues. The situation was escalating faster than I'd anticipated. Louise would be furious about Marcus Sr.'s sudden financial concerns, and she'd be looking for someone to blame. I needed to ensure that blame fell precisely where I wanted it. I made one more call on my way home. Janice, it's Becca. Remember our conversation yesterday? I think it's time to move forward with that society column piece. Already? I thought you wanted to wait. Plans have changed. The situation is developing quickly, and I need to stay ahead of it. Understood. I'll have Sarah start making calls today. By the time I arrived home to prepare for the family dinner, 3 separate fires had been lit under Louise Montgomery's. Perfect birthday plans. Financial pressure from her husband, logistical issues with the catering, and now media inquiries about the event that would raise expectations even higher. And none of it could be traced directly back to me. As I changed. For dinner, Teddy arrived home looking stressed. Family dinner tonight, he said, loosening his tie. Dad's on the warpath about Mom's birthday budget. Oh? I kept my tone casual. That sounds uncomfortable. It's going to be a nightmare. Mom's already called twice, furious that Dad's questioning her plans. He sighed heavily. Can we just skip it and claim food poisoning? I smiled, touching his cheek gently. No, we can't. This is important. Why? So we can watch my parents fight over ice sculptures and vintage champagne? Because this is family, Teddy, and sometimes family needs to have difficult conversations. He studied me with a puzzled expression. You're different lately. Calmer. I keep waiting for you to blow up about being excluded from the birthday, but instead you're almost serene. I kissed him lightly. Let's just say I've gained some perspective. What I didn't tell him was that tonight's dinner was a crucial part of my plan. The family tensions I'd carefully stoked needed to be witnessed firsthand, not just for my strategy to work, but for Teddy to finally see the truth about his mother that he'd been avoiding for years. The Montgomery family dinner that evening was exactly the controlled chaos I had anticipated. Louise, elegant in a tailored dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, was icily furious. Marcus Sr. was uncharacteristically assertive, Dominique looked uncomfortable but resolute, and Teddy was desperately trying to mediate, a situation he didn't fully understand. I observed it all with calm detachment, speaking only when directly addressed. This is absurd, Louise declared, setting down her wineglass with more force than necessary. The Bellamy has been booked for months. Contracts have been signed, invitations sent. You can't possibly suggest scaling back now. I'm not suggesting it, I'm insisting, Marcus Sr. replied firmly. The costs have become unreasonable, Louise. 300 guests at $400 per head, before even factoring in the entertainment and extras. Louise's eyes flashed. It's my 60th birthday, Marcus. A milestone that deserves proper celebration. Proper celebration doesn't require financial irresponsibility, he countered. Since when have you become so concerned with budgets? Louise demanded. You've never questioned my judgment before. Marcus Sr. glanced briefly in my direction before answering. Perhaps I should have. This contract is concerning. Excessive? Penalties. Hidden fees. Did you even read it before signing? Louise's gaze followed his to me, her eyes narrowing. What does Rebecca have to do with this? Nothing, Marcus Sr. replied too quickly. I'm simply pointing out, you spoke to her. About this, Louise accused, her voice dangerously quiet. About my birthday. The table fell silent. Teddy looked between his father and me, confusion evident on his face. Becca? He questioned. I took a sip of water before answering. Your father had some questions about standard event contracts. As a professional in the industry, I offered my perspective. You went behind my back, Louise hissed, her perfect composure cracking. After you specifically what, Mother? Dominique interrupted. Excluded her from your birthday? Made it clear she's not family? Are you really surprised she's not protecting your interests? Louise turned to her daughter, clearly shocked by the unexpected alliance. This doesn't concern you, Dominique. Doesn't it? Since I'm on the planning committee, spending hours of my time on an event that's spiraling out of control? Dominique's voice rose slightly. An event where you deliberately hurt someone I care about? Teddy was watching this exchange with growing alarm. Can someone please explain what's happening? Louise recovered quickly, smoothing her features into a mask of wounded dignity. Your wife is trying to sabotage my birthday, Theodore. After being politely excluded, she's retaliating by poisoning your father against the plans. That's not... What happened? Marcus Sr. started, but Louise cut him off. Isn't it? She shows up unannounced, fills your head with concerns about contracts, and suddenly you're questioning everything? The timing is rather convenient. All eyes turned to me. This was the moment I'd been anticipating, the direct accusation that would force positions to be taken. Teddy looked troubled, torn between his instinct to defend me and his lifetime habit of placating his mother. I could have denied it, could have played innocent. Instead, I chose honesty. I did speak with your father about the contract, I acknowledged calmly, because he deserved to know what he was signing up for. That's not sabotage, Louise. That's transparency. Louise's face flushed with anger. How dare you interfere? How dare I what? I interrupted, my voice still measured. Share my professional expertise with family. Isn't that what family does? Look out for each other's interests? You are not family, Louise snapped, the words echoing in the sudden silence of the dining room. Teddy inhaled sharply. Mom, that's enough. Louise turned to him, her expression softening into practiced concern. Theodore, surely you can see what she's doing? She's trying to drive a wedge between us because she wasn't invited to one event. One event? Dominique challenged. Mother, you've been driving wedges since the day Teddy introduced her. The forgotten invitations, the seating arrangements that separate them, the constant comparisons to Maddie. Dominique, Louise's sharp reprimand cut through the air. No, let's talk about Maddie, I said, seizing the opening. Your perfect alternative, the one who got away, the doctor you can't stop praising. Louise's expression turned wary. Madeline is a family friend. There's nothing inappropriate about maintaining that connection. Absolutely nothing, I agreed. Which is why I had lunch with her yesterday. The bomb landed exactly as intended. Louise's face paled, while Teddy looked completely blindsided. You had lunch with Maddie? He asked. My ex-girlfriend, Maddie? I did. I turned back to Louise. We had the most fascinating conversation about why she really broke up with Teddy 8 years ago. Louise's hand tightened around her wine glass. Ancient history that has no relevance. It's relevant when you're still using her as a weapon against me, I countered. Especially when the real story contradicts the narrative you've created. What real story? Teddy asked, his attention fully engaged now. I held Louise's gaze as I answered. Maddie didn't leave you for her career, Teddy. She left because your mother gave her an ultimatum: end the relationship or lose her position at the Montgomery Memorial Hospital Board. A position that was crucial for her early career advancement. The color drained from Louise's face. That's a lie. Is it? Maddie kept the emails. She showed them to me yesterday. Teddy turned to his mother, shock written across his features. Mom, is this true? Louise's composure cracked further. Madeline was never right for you, Theodore. She was too focused on her career, too ambitious, too independent, I finished, too unwilling to be controlled, like me. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus Sr. looked genuinely shocked. This revelation was apparently new to him as well. Dominique had a hand over her mouth, and Teddy looked like his entire understanding of the past 8 years was being rewritten before his eyes. All this time, he said slowly, you've been comparing Becca to a relationship you deliberately destroyed? Louise attempted to recover. I was protecting you. No, Teddy cut her off, his voice firm in a way I'd rarely heard. You were controlling me, and you're still doing it. He turned to me, a new understanding in his eyes. The invitation wasn't a mistake or an oversight. Was it? She really did cross your name out? I nodded. And the Bellamy isn't hosting some small family gathering. It's a huge event with hundreds of guests. But somehow there wasn't room for my wife. 300 guests, according to the contract, Marcus Sr. confirmed grimly. Teddy stood abruptly. We're leaving. Louise reached for his arm. Theodore, don't be dramatic. Stay so we can discuss this reasonably. He pulled away from her touch. There's nothing reasonable about how you've treated Becca. For years I've made excuses for you, tried to keep the peace. But this, excluding my wife while inviting hundreds of others, then lying about it? After everything else you've done? He shook his head. No more. As we left the dining room, Louise called after us, her voice brittle with barely controlled fury. If you walk out now, don't expect to be welcome at the birthday at all, Theodore. Either of you. Teddy paused at the door, turning back to face his mother. That won't be a problem, Mother. We wouldn't dream of attending an event where family is so clearly optional. The drive home was quiet, Teddy processing everything he'd learned. It wasn't until we were inside our apartment that he finally spoke. How long have you been planning this? Since I saw the crossed-out invitation, I admitted. He ran a hand through his hair. The contract issues, the Maddie revelation, all of it was calculated. Yes. To what end, Becca? Revenge? I shook my head. Clarity, for both of us. Your mother has been manipulating this family for years, using emotional leverage to maintain control. I needed you to see it clearly, without the fog of excuses and justifications. Teddy was quiet for a long moment. I've been a coward, he finally said, afraid to rock the boat, to challenge her version of reality. You've been conditioned to keep the peace at all costs, I corrected gently. There's a difference. He looked at me with new eyes. So what happens now? I smiled, a genuine smile that held both warmth and determination. Now we move to phase 2. There's a phase 2? He looked equal parts impressed and apprehensive. There's always a phase 2. I pulled out my phone, sending a pre-composed text to multiple recipients. Your mother's birthday celebration is about to undergo some significant changes. The following morning, Teddy and I sat at our breakfast table, my laptop open between us as I walked him through what I'd been orchestrating. The Bellamy contract has a force majeure clause that allows for cancellation under extraordinary circumstances, I explained, pointing to the highlighted section. Most clients never read that part carefully. Teddy scanned the text, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. You're going to cancel her venue? Can you actually do that? Not directly, I admitted. But Marcus Lawton, the general manager, is now seriously concerned about potential payment issues after my conversation with your father. Add in the fact that Louise has been verbally abusive to his staff, and he's looking for a way out. So, what's the plan? I smiled. A pipe burst. Very unfortunate. Affecting the ballroom's electrical system. Repair is estimated to take at least 3 weeks. Teddy's eyes widened. There's no actual burst pipe. Of course not. But there will be a very official-looking notice about one, along with sincere apologies and full refund of deposits. As if on cue? My phone rang. I checked the screen. Louise's name flashed across it. I showed Teddy, raising an eyebrow in question. Put it on speaker, he said after a moment's hesitation. Louise's voice cut through the room, sharp with accusation. What have you done? Good morning to you too, Louise, I replied calmly. Don't play innocent. The Bellamy just called. There's supposedly water damage that will take weeks to repair, coincidentally affecting only the ballroom on the exact date of my birthday. This has your fingerprints all over it. I caught Teddy's eye across the table. This was the moment of truth. Would he fall back into old patterns of placating his mother, or stand with me? That sounds like terrible luck, Mother, Teddy said, his voice steady. Have they offered alternative dates? Louise made a sound of frustrated disbelief. Alternative dates? My birthday is in 10 days. Invitations have been sent. Vendors booked. This isn't about rescheduling, Theodore. This is sabotage. That's a serious accusation, I remarked. Do you have evidence to support it? I don't need evidence. I know you're behind this, Rebecca. You've never wanted me to have this celebration. Actually, Louise, what I never wanted was to be deliberately excluded from a family event. But here we are. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. When Louise spoke again, her voice had shifted to a sweeter, more conciliatory tone, one I recognized as her manipulation voice. Theodore, darling, could we speak privately, mother to son? I watched Teddy's face, seeing the familiar conflict there, the pull of filial obligation warring with his new resolve. Anything you want to say to me, you can say with Becca present, he replied finally. We're a package deal, remember? Louise's tone instantly hardened. This attitude is exactly why I limited the guest list. You've changed since marrying her, Theodore. You used to understand family loyalty. I still do, Teddy countered. But my primary loyalty is to my wife. That's how marriage works. So you admit you're part of this sabotage? I admit nothing of the sort. But I find it interesting that your first instinct was to call and accuse Becca, rather than exploring solutions to your venue problem. Louise was silent for a moment, clearly recalibrating. Fine. If you won't help me, I'll handle this myself. She ended the call abruptly. Teddy stared at the phone, a mix of emotions playing across his face. That was liberating, I suggested. A slow smile spread across his face. Actually, yes. He shook his head in wonder. I can't believe I just stood up to her, and the world didn't end. Far from it, I agreed, reaching across to squeeze his hand. This is just the beginning. My phone buzzed with an incoming text from Dominique. Mom is on the warpath. Just got a hysterical call about the Bellamy. What did you do? I showed it to Teddy, who chuckled. Should we bring Dominique into the loop? I think it's time. I agreed, calling her back instead of texting. Becca, what is happening? Dominique demanded when she answered. Mom's convinced you've orchestrated some elaborate revenge scheme. Put me on speaker if Kyle's there, I requested. When she confirmed, they were both listening, I continued. I've been making some inquiries that may have resulted in certain complications for Louise's birthday plans. Holy shit, Kyle breathed. You actually did something. What exactly? I explained about the Bellamy's sudden maintenance issues, careful to emphasize that I hadn't directly falsified anything, merely raised concerns with the right people. That's That's brilliant, Dominique said, sounding impressed despite herself. Devious, but brilliant. Mom's going to lose her mind, Kyle added, a note of admiration in his voice. She's been bragging about the Bellamy to everyone who would— Listen, I know, I replied. And now she has 10 days to find an alternative venue for 300 guests. Impossible, Dominique declared. Every decent venue is booked months in advance, especially for an event that size. It does seem challenging, I agreed innocently. There was a pause before Kyle started laughing. You already have a backup venue lined up, don't you? I might. Have some availability at the Stratford Hotel, I conceded. Their grand salon was reserved for a corporate event that just happens to have been canceled. The Stratford? Dominique sounded impressed. That's even more exclusive than the Bellamy. It is, I confirmed, and significantly more expensive. So, what's the plan? Kyle asked. Let Louise stew for a while and then offer the Stratford as a solution? Something like that. I hedged, not wanting to reveal all my cards yet. But I'll need your help with the next phase. After finishing the call with Dominique and Kyle, I turned to Teddy. Are you sure you're okay with all this? It's not too late to back out. He considered the question seriously. I've spent my entire life trying to keep my mother happy at everyone else's expense, especially yours. For the first time, I'm seeing how manipulative she really is. He took my hand. I'm not backing out. Whatever you've planned, I'm in. My phone rang again. This time it was Marcus Lawton from the Bellamy. Mrs. Montgomery has been calling incessantly, he reported, sounding harassed. She's demanding to inspect the water damage personally and is threatening legal action if we don't accommodate her event as planned. As expected, I replied. Hold firm on the maintenance story. Has she mentioned alternative arrangements? She insists nothing else will do. Says she'll have the mayor call us if necessary. I smiled. Let her try. Just make sure the cancellation is processed properly, with all deposits refunded. Of course. And Becca? The Stratford called to confirm they've received your inquiry about the Grand Salon. They're aware of the situation. Excellent. Thank you, Marcus. As I ended the call, my email pinged with a notification from Janice at the Society magazine. The subject line read, Draft for approval, Montgomery birthday. Drama, exclusive inside story. I opened it to find a meticulously crafted article detailing Louise Montgomery's extravagant birthday plans, the Bellamy cancellation disaster, and quotes from anonymous sources close to the family, hinting at financial concerns and behind the scenes. Tensions? Is that going to print? Teddy asked, reading over my shoulder. Not unless I approve it, I assured him. It's leverage, not ammunition. At least for now. He nodded, understanding dawning. So Louise has a choice. Find a new venue quickly and salvage her celebration, or face public embarrassment in the society pages she cares so much about. Exactly. And when the Stratford solution mysteriously becomes available, she'll have to take it, Teddy finished. Brilliant. I closed my laptop, satisfaction warming me. This was the first real victory, not just the venue cancellation, but Teddy's wholehearted support. For the first time in our marriage, we were truly united, against his mother's manipulations. My phone buzzed with another incoming call, Maddie this time. Louise just called me, she reported. She's fishing for information about our lunch, wanted to know exactly what we discussed. What did you tell her? That we had a lovely, illuminating conversation about the past and present, and that I was looking forward to seeing how everything unfolds. Maddie's voice held a note of satisfaction. She sounded terrified. As I ended the call, Teddy looked at me with newfound respect. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Not everything, I admitted, but enough to ensure that whatever Louise decides to do next, we'll be ready. The first domino had fallen. Louise's perfect birthday venue was gone, her carefully constructed plans in disarray. But this was just the opening move in a game she didn't yet realize we were playing. A game where, for once, I held most of the cards. The Montgomery family group chat exploded over the next 24 hours. Though Teddy and I had been removed from it, Louise's doing, no doubt, Dominique kept us informed with regular screenshots. The messages painted a vivid picture of Louise's escalating panic. "This is sabotage," she'd written. "The Bellamy has hosted events through actual floods before. A burst pipe doesn't take 3 weeks to repair." Marcus Sr. had responded with surprising firmness. "The contract is canceled, deposits returned. We need to move forward with alternatives instead of assigning blame." Louise wasn't deterred. "I've called every venue in the city. Nothing suitable is available on such short notice. This birthday is ruined." Dominique had attempted reason. "Mom, we can postpone to a later date when the Bellamy is available again." "Absolutely not," Louise had replied. "The invitation specified. The date." I refused to look disorganized in front of everyone. As Teddy and I reviewed the messages over our morning coffee, my phone rang. It was Alex from Elite Catering. "Louise Montgomery is on the warpath," he reported without preamble. "She's demanding we maintain our original catering contract regardless of venue, assuming she finds one." "Is that feasible?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Without knowing the new kitchen facilities? Impossible. Different venues have different equipment, different restrictions. We'd need to adjust the menu accordingly." "And have you explained this to Mrs. Montgomery?" Alex let out a short laugh. "I tried. She accused me of conspiring against her and threatened to blacklist our company throughout her social circle." "That sounds stressful," I remarked sympathetically. "I can't imagine you'd want to continue working with such a difficult client." "Normally, no," he agreed. "But since you've vouched for the family, I'm willing to be flexible." "Within reason." "Of course." "Of course. And what would be reasonable under these circumstances?" "A simplified menu. No imported truffles or other items with uncertain availability, and a non-refundable deposit increase to cover our additional planning time." "That sounds entirely fair," I agreed. "I'm sure Mrs. Montgomery will understand the necessity once she's had time to consider her options." After ending the call, I updated Teddy. "Your mother is now fighting with the caterer." He shook his head, a mix of disbelief and reluctant admiration on his face. "You're dismantling her entire event piece by piece." "I'm not doing anything," I corrected. "I'm simply creating circumstances where Louise's own behavior becomes her biggest obstacle." My phone buzzed with a text from Jamie at the Bellamy. "Mrs. M showed up demanding to see the supposed water damage. Security had to escort her out. She's now threatening to call the health department to shut us down for code violations." I showed the message to Teddy, who winced. "Mom's really losing it." "This is just the beginning," I predicted. "The more desperate she becomes, the more extreme her reactions will be." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. When Teddy answered, we found Marcus Sr. standing there, looking uncomfortable in his precisely tailored suit. "May I come in?" he asked formally. Teddy stepped aside, surprise evident on his face. His father rarely visited our apartment, preferring to summon us to the family home when necessary. "Coffee?" I offered as Marcus Sr. settled stiffly on our sofa. "No, thank you." He cleared his throat. "I'll be direct. Louise is convinced that you're behind the Bellamy cancellation, Rebecca." "That's a serious accusation," I replied evenly. "It is, and one I'm not entirely convinced is unfounded." He held up a hand as Teddy started to protest. "I'm not here to assign blame. The situation is what it is. I'm here because Louise is unwell." Teddy leaned forward. "What do you mean, unwell?" "She hasn't slept, barely eaten. She's called every venue in the city and neighboring counties. She's threatened legal action against the Bellamy. She's even contacted the mayor's office." Marcus Sr. looked genuinely concerned. "This birthday has become an obsession that's affecting her health." I felt a flicker of guilt, quickly suppressed by the memory of Louise's deliberate cruelty. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully. "But I'm not sure how we can help." Marcus Sr. met my gaze directly. "I think you know exactly how you could help, Rebecca, if you were so inclined." The implication hung in the air between us. He knew, or at least strongly suspected, that I had alternatives available that could salvage the situation. "What exactly are you asking?" I pressed. "I'm asking if you know of any suitable venues that might be available on such short notice." His voice was measured, careful. "Given your professional connections, it seems possible you might have insights the rest of us lack." Teddy looked between his father and me, waiting for my response. This was a pivotal moment. Revealing the Stratford option now would give Louise an easy out, diminishing the impact of the lesson I was trying to teach. But refusing outright would alienate Marcus Sr., a potential ally. "I might have some options," I conceded cautiously. "But there would need to be conditions." Marcus Sr. nodded slowly. I assumed as much. "What conditions?" "First, a genuine apology from Louise for deliberately excluding me from the birthday plans." "Difficult, but potentially manageable," he assessed. "What else?" "Going forward, Teddy and I are treated as a unit. No more forgetting to include me in family events or communications." "Reasonable," he agreed. "Anything else?" I glanced at Teddy, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes. Louise needs to understand that her controlling behavior toward Teddy, toward both of us, is damaging our relationship. With the entire family. That has to change." Marcus Sr. was quiet for a moment, considering. "You're asking for fundamental changes in behavior that's been established for decades." "I am," I confirmed. "Because without those changes, any solution I provide will only be a temporary fix to a permanent problem." He stood, straightening his already immaculate jacket. "I'll speak with Louise." "There's one more thing," I added. "The Stratford Hotel has availability on the original date. Their Grand Salon is actually more prestigious than the Bellamy Ballroom, though significantly more expensive." Marcus Sr.'s eyebrows rose. "You already have a venue in mind." "I do, but it's held as a courtesy through my professional relationship with the management. They won't book it without my explicit approval." A hint of respect flickered in his eyes. "I see, and that approval depends on Louise meeting your conditions." "Exactly. You're more formidable than we gave you credit for, Rebecca." "I know," I replied simply. After Marcus Sr. left, Teddy turned to me. "You're really going to offer them the Stratford?" "Eventually," I confirmed, "but not immediately, and not without concessions." My father seemed impressed. "Your father is a businessman. He recognizes negotiation when he sees it." I checked my phone as a new notification appeared. "Interesting. Your mother just tried to book the Sheraton downtown as a backup option." "The Sheraton is nowhere near the Bellamy's level," Teddy noted. "No, it's not. And unfortunately for Louise, they just had a last-minute cancellation of their booking system for the next 48 hours. Technical upgrades. Very inconvenient timing." Teddy stared at me. "You got the Sheraton to claim technical issues too?" I might have mentioned to their events manager that a particularly difficult client was desperate for a venue. Lisa still owes me for saving her job last year when a celebrity wedding nearly went sideways on her watch. Teddy shook his head in amazement. "You really do have connections everywhere." "Not everywhere," I corrected. "Just in all the places that matter for this particular situation." My phone rang again, Dominique this time. "Mom's on her way to your apartment," she warned without preamble. "Dad told her about your Stratford connection and she's not in a reasonable state of mind." I thanked her for the heads up and turned to Teddy. "Your mother is coming here. Now." He paled slightly. "What's the plan?" "We receive her politely, listen to whatever she has to say, and make no commitments until she meets our conditions." "She's going to be furious," he warned. "I'm counting on it," I replied. because people reveal their true selves when they're angry. And it's time you saw your mother's true self without any filters or excuses. 20 minutes later, our doorbell rang again, this time with the insistent, repeated pressing that could only be Louise. Teddy took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and opened the door. Louise Montgomery stormed in without waiting for an invitation, her designer handbag clutched like a weapon, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. "You!" she hissed, fixing, her gaze on me. "You did this." And the confrontation I'd been orchestrating for days finally began in earnest. "Louise," I greeted her calmly. "Please, come in. Would you like some tea?" Her eyes flashed with indignation at my composure. "Don't patronize me, Rebecca. I know exactly what you've done." Teddy stepped forward. "Mother, if you've come here to throw accusations, stay out of this, Theodore," she snapped, not taking her eyes off me. "This is between your wife and me." "Actually," he replied firmly, "anything involving Becca involves me, too. That's how marriage works." Louise's attention swiveled to her son, momentarily thrown by his defiance. Then she collected herself, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from her immaculate blouse. "Fine. Then you can both explain how the Bellamy suddenly has water damage, Elite Catering is threatening to cancel our contract, and the Sheraton's booking system has mysteriously crashed, all within 48 hours of your father showing you our contract." "That does sound like an unfortunate series of coincidences," I observed mildly. Louise took a step toward me, her carefully maintained facade cracking. "Do not insult my intelligence. This is revenge for not being invited to the birthday, isn't it? A petty, spiteful tantrum because you couldn't bear to be excluded from one event." I met her gaze steadily. "Is that what you think this is about? A single event? What else could possibly justify such childish behavior?" 3 years, I said, quietly. 3 years of deliberate exclusion, condescension, and undermining. 3 years of watching you try to drive a wedge between Teddy and me. 3 years of Teddy making excuses for your behavior while I swallowed my dignity for the sake of family peace. Louise scoffed. "How dramatic. If you felt excluded, perhaps you should examine why you've never fit into this family in the first place." "Mother," Teddy warned, his voice hardening. But I placed a gentle hand on his arm. "It's all right, Teddy. Your mother deserves honesty at this point." I turned back to Louise. "I've never fit in because you've made sure of it. From the moment Teddy introduced us, you decided I wasn't good enough, wasn't from the right background, didn't have the right connections. Because you aren't and you don't," Louise stated bluntly. "Theodore comes from a family with standards and traditions. You were never going to meet those standards no matter how much he might wish it." I smiled, surprising her. "And yet here we are, with you standing in my living room, practically begging for my help." She bristled. "I am not begging for anything." "Aren't you?" "Your father told us about the Stratford, Louise," Teddy interjected. "He told us you know Becca has connections that could save your birthday celebration." Louise's composure slipped further. "If she's deliberately sabotaging my event, the least she can do is fix it." "I haven't sabotaged anything," I replied. "But I do have a solution. Whether you get access to it depends entirely on you." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means there are conditions," Teddy explained, "starting with a genuine apology to Becca for deliberately excluding her from your birthday." Louise's laugh was short and brittle. "An apology? For exercising my right to choose my own guest list? Absurd. Then I guess you don't need my help." "After all," I said with a shrug, "I'm sure one of the hotel banquet rooms in the suburbs will be perfectly adequate for your needs." The color drained from Louise's face as the reality of her situation sank in. Her perfect birthday celebration, the one she'd been planning for months, bragging about to her social circle, was slipping away. And the only person who could salvage, It was the daughter-in-law she'd spent years belittling. "This is blackmail," she accused. "This is consequences," I corrected. "For the first time in possibly your entire life, your actions towards someone you deemed unimportant are having actual repercussions." Louise's eyes narrowed as she studied me, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. "You're not at all what you appear to be, are you?" "No," I agreed. "I'm not the passive, accommodating doormat you assumed. I'm a successful businesswoman with my own connections, my own influence, and my own power. Power you never bothered to acknowledge because you were too busy looking down on me." The revelation hung in the air between us. Louise Montgomery, who had spent decades cultivating her social position, who believed her family name granted her automatic superiority, was suddenly confronted with the reality that she'd been outmaneuvered by someone she'd considered beneath her. "What exactly do you want?" she finally asked, her voice tight. "Respect," I answered simply. "Not adoration, not even particularly warm feelings. Just basic respect for my position in this family and in Teddy's life." Louise looked between us, calculation replacing rage in her expression. "And if I agree to your conditions, you'll secure the Stratford?" "I will." "By when?" "Today. The birthday can proceed as planned, just at a different venue." She nodded once, sharply. "Fine. I apologize for excluding you from the guest list. It was inconsiderate." "Not good enough," Teddy said immediately. "A real apology, Mother. One that acknowledges the pattern, not just this isolated incident." Louise's face contorted with the effort of containing her rage. Being forced to apologize, truly apologize, was clearly a novel and deeply uncomfortable experience for her. "Very well," she said finally, each word precisely enunciated. "I apologize for my pattern of behavior toward you, Rebecca. I have been unwelcoming and dismissive since you joined our family. It was wrong of me to exclude you from my birthday celebration, especially while inviting hundreds of other guests." I studied her face, seeing the calculation behind her words. This wasn't genuine remorse, it was strategic capitulation, but it was a start. "Thank you, Louise. I accept your apology." "Wonderful," she said briskly, her tone immediately shifting to businesslike efficiency. "Now, about the Stratford—" "Not so fast," Teddy interrupted. "An apology is just the beginning. We need to discuss how things will change going forward." Louise's smile was tight. "Of course, Theodore, but perhaps we could secure the venue first? Time is rather critical." "The venue can wait 15 more minutes," I said calmly. "This conversation is more important." Something dangerous flashed in Louise's eyes, the momentary glimpse of the fury she was barely containing. "What more do you want from me?" "I've apologized. I've humbled myself. Isn't that enough?" "This isn't about humbling you," Teddy said, his voice softening slightly. "It's about establishing a relationship that works for all of us. One where Becca isn't constantly fighting for basic inclusion. And one where you aren't manipulated into choosing between your wife and your mother," I added. Louise's gaze darted between us, assessing. "You've discussed this extensively, I see." "We have," Teddy confirmed, "because we're partners. That's what we do." A silent moment stretched between the three of us. I could almost see Louise recalculating her approach, adjusting to this new reality where her son and I presented a united front. "What specifically are you asking for?" she finally inquired, her tone carefully neutral. "3 things," I replied. "First, Teddy and I are treated as a unit in all family matters. Invitations, events, communications. Second, no more comparisons to Maddie or references to Teddy's life before me. And third, you acknowledge, publicly at your birthday celebration, that I helped secure the new venue after the Bellamy cancellation." The last condition clearly caught her by surprise. "Publicly acknowledge your involvement? Why?" "Because your social circle needs to understand that I'm not an outsider to be pitied. or dismissed. I'm a valuable member of this family with my own connections and capabilities. Louise's lips pressed into a thin line as she considered the implications. Public acknowledgement would not only validate my position, but also reveal that she had needed my help, a double blow to her carefully cultivated image of perfection and control. The first two conditions are reasonable, she conceded reluctantly. The third would require careful wording. The wording is simple, I countered. When disaster struck with our original venue, my daughter-in-law Becca stepped in to secure the even more prestigious Stratford Hotel through her professional connections. That's all it takes. Louise visibly flinched at being given a script. For someone who had always controlled the narrative, being told exactly what to say was perhaps the most difficult concession of all. Louise stared at me for a long moment, the internal struggle evident on her face. Her desire to salvage her birthday celebration battled with her pride and lifelong habit of control. I need to make a phone call, she said finally, pulling out her cell phone and stepping toward our balcony for privacy. As soon as she was out of earshot, Teddy turned to me. Do you think she'll agree? She doesn't have a choice, I replied. Softly. Her social standing is tied to this celebration. Canceling now would be more humiliating than acknowledging my help. Through the glass door, we could see Louise gesturing animatedly as she spoke on the phone. I suspected she was calling Marcus Sr., seeking a way out of the corner she'd been backed into. You know, Teddy said thoughtfully, I've never seen my mother compromise on anything she considered important. Not once in my entire life. I squeezed his hand. That's because she's never faced someone who held real leverage over her. Your father enables her. Dominique avoids conflict with her. And you've always eventually given in. He nodded slowly. And now she's facing all three of us standing firm. Plus Kyle. 4 against 1, I confirmed. And she's finally realizing it. Louise returned a few minutes later, her expression unreadable. I've spoken with your father, she informed Teddy. He thinks I should accept your terms. And what do you think? I asked. She drew herself up with as much dignity as she could muster. I think that I have spent 60 years getting exactly what I want. Perhaps it's time I learned to collaborate. The word seemed to physically pain her, but there was something else in her eyes. A reluctant recognition, perhaps even a hint of respect. So we have an agreement? Teddy pressed. We do, Louise confirmed stiffly. You will both be included in all family matters going forward. I will refrain from mentioning Theodore's past relationships, and I will acknowledge Rebecca's assistance with the venue during my birthday celebration. Thank you, Mother, Teddy said, genuine warmth in his voice. Louise's expression softened slightly at her son's approval. You realize, of course, that this changes the dynamics of our entire family. For the better, he replied firmly. She turned to me. So, Rebecca, the Stratford Hotel. Can you secure it today as promised? I can, I confirmed, pulling out my phone. In fact, I already have a tentative hold on it. One call will confirm the booking. Louise watched as I dialed the Stratford's event director, putting the call on speaker so she could hear the entire conversation. Michael, it's Becca. We're ready to proceed with the Montgomery booking for next Saturday. Yes, the Grand Salon. The full premium package? Yes, we'll need the extended catering options. Perfect. Could you email the contract directly to Mrs. Montgomery? As I provided Louise's contact information, I watched her expression shift from suspicion to surprise, to something approaching admiration. The ease with which I navigated the booking process, the obvious respect in the event director's voice as he spoke to me, was revealing the truth she'd been denying for years. I was a professional force in my own right, with connections and influence she hadn't bothered to recognize. The contract will be in your inbox within the hour, I informed her as I ended the call, along with contact information for Elite Catering's executive chef, who's prepared to adjust the menu for the new venue. You've already spoken with them? Louise asked, unable to hide her astonishment. Of course, I replied calmly. I wanted to ensure a seamless transition when you agreed to our terms. For perhaps the first time in our relationship, Louise Montgomery looked at me with genuine recognition. Not as an interloper or a social inferior, but as someone worthy of consideration. There's one more thing, I said, meeting Louise's gaze, steadily. The guest list needs to be finalized today for the Stratford. Louise nodded, suddenly businesslike. I'll have my assistant send over the confirmed RSVPs immediately. Actually, I countered, I'd like to review the full invitation. List first. Her eyes narrowed. Why? Because I want to ensure that no one else has been accidentally excluded. I emphasized the word just enough to make my point. For a moment, I thought she might refuse. Then, surprisingly, she laughed. A short, genuine sound of reluctant amusement. You really don't trust me, do you, Rebecca? You haven't given me much. Reason to, I replied honestly. Fair enough. She pulled out her tablet from her designer handbag, unlocked it with manicured fingers, and handed it to me. The complete list. 322 invited guests, with annotations for those who have already confirmed. I scrolled through the document, noting with satisfaction that both my parents were included. This seems comprehensive. Of course it is, Louise replied stiffly. Whatever you may think of me, I am nothing if not thorough. And now, Teddy interjected, you'll be thorough in including both of us in everything going forward. Louise regarded her son with a new expression, something between exasperation and grudging respect. You've become quite assertive suddenly, Theodore. Not suddenly, he corrected. I'm finally voicing what I've always felt, but was afraid to say. Fear of disappointing you has shaped too many of my decisions for too long. A flash of genuine hurt crossed Louise's face before she masked it. I see. And you believe I've been controlling? You know you have, Mother. She was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Then, with visible effort, she straightened her shoulders. Perhaps we all have adjustments to make. This concession, small as it was, felt monumental coming from Louise Montgomery. I exchanged a glance with Teddy, both of us recognizing the significance of the moment. Now, Louise continued, businesslike once more, if the venue is secured, I have a great deal of replanning to do. The Stratford layout will require adjustments to the seating chart, the floral arrangements, the staging for the band. I have the Stratford floor plan here, I offered, pulling up the document on my laptop. And I've taken the liberty of creating a preliminary layout based on your original Bellamy plans. Louise stared at the screen as I opened the file, revealing a meticulously designed layout that accommodated all her key requirements while optimizing for the Stratford's unique architecture. You prepared this in advance? She asked, clearly, struggling to process my level of preparation. I like to be thorough too, I replied simply. Something shifted in her expression then, a fundamental reassessment. For 3 years, she had dismissed me as someone who had merely caught her son's eye, someone without substance or value. Now she was seeing the reality, a strategic thinker who had outmaneuvered her at her own game. I've underestimated you, she said finally, the admission clearly costing her. Yes, I agreed. You have? Well, she gathered her things, composure intact, but perspective irrevocably altered. I should go. There's much to coordinate. At the door, she paused, turning back to face us. The Stratford is actually a superior venue, she conceded, the closest thing to a compliment she had ever offered me. Perhaps this collaboration has some merit after all. As the door closed behind her, Teddy turned to me with a mixture of amazement and admiration. Did that actually just happen? Did my mother essentially admit you were right? She did, I confirmed, a smile spreading across my face. And more importantly, she's beginning to see me. The real me. Not the version of me she invented to justify her behavior. Teddy pulled me into a tight embrace. You are remarkable, you know that. I do, I replied, relaxing into his arms. And now, finally, your mother is starting to realize it too. The days leading up to Louise's rescheduled birthday celebration were a flurry of activity. Once she committed to our agreement, Louise approached the venue change with characteristic efficiency, issuing updated invitations that managed to make the Stratford sound like her first choice all along. The Bellamy renovation provided an unexpected opportunity to secure the even more exclusive Stratford Grand Salon, the email announcement read, somehow transforming disaster into triumph. Teddy and I watched this reframing with amusement, but said nothing. Louise was entitled to save face with her social circle, as long as she honored our agreement when it mattered. The true test came 3 days before the event, when Louise requested our presence at the final planning meeting at the Stratford. It was the first time we'd been included in any of the birthday preparations, and I could feel Teddy's tension as we entered the hotel's elegant conference room. Louise was already there, surrounded by binders, fabric swatches, and her party planner, a harried-looking woman named Vivian who seemed perpetually on the verge of tears. Theodore, Rebecca, Louise greeted us with a nod. Thank you for coming. The formality wasn't unusual, but the genuine thank you was. Small shifts, I was learning, could signal significant changes with Louise. Vivian, please review the schedule changes with Rebecca, Louise directed. She should understand the flow of the evening since she'll be mentioned in my remarks. Vivian's eyes widened slightly, clearly surprised by my elevated status. For the next hour, we discussed the event details, with Louise occasionally deferring to my opinion on logistical matters. Another small but meaningful change. The head table arrangements have been updated, Louise explained, showing us the seating chart. Theodore and Rebecca, you'll be seated with your father and me, alongside Dominique and Kyle. Teddy glanced at me, his surprise evident. In previous family events, we had always been separated. Him at the family table, me relegated to distant relatives or random acquaintances. That's a change, he observed cautiously. Louise smoothed the chart with precise movements. Well, it seems appropriate to have immediate family together. The admission that I was immediate family hung in the air, its significance not lost on any of us. After the meeting, as we walked through the grand salon where workers were installing crystal chandeliers and constructing an elaborate stage, Teddy squeezed my hand. She's really trying, he murmured. I've never seen her make this kind of effort before. Because she finally understands she has to, I replied. This isn't generosity. It's recognition of a new reality. That evening, Dominique and Kyle came over for dinner, eager to hear the latest developments. Mom's telling everyone that the Stratford was her vision all along, Dominique reported, rolling her eyes. Apparently, the Bellamy was just too predictable for her taste. Kyle laughed. The best part is watching her explain to her friends how she managed to book the Stratford on short notice when they've all been told it's impossible. What's she saying? I asked, curious about Louise's cover story. That's the interesting part, Dominique replied, her expression thoughtful. She's actually giving you credit, at least partially. Tells people her resourceful daughter-in-law helped secure it through professional connections. Teddy nearly choked on his wine. She's acknowledging Becca's help before she has to at the party? Not just acknowledging, Kyle added. She almost sounds proud, in a weird, competitive way, like she's taking credit for bringing you into the family as if your connections are somehow a reflection of her good judgment. I smiled, recognizing the classic Louise maneuver, transforming defeat into victory by reframing the narrative. But this time, her reframing required acknowledging my value, which represented real progress. So, are you ready for the grand event? Dominique asked. You'll be under serious scrutiny now that Mom's been talking you up. I think we're more than ready, Teddy replied. meeting my eyes with a smile that held both gratitude and pride. The evening of Louise's birthday celebration arrived with perfect weather and impeccable timing. The Stratford Hotel glowed with warmth as guests in formal attire streamed through the grand entrance, greeted by uniformed staff offering champagne flutes and escort cards. Teddy and I arrived early at Louise's specific request, another unprecedented development. We found her in the bridal suite the hotel had repurposed as her preparation room, looking elegant in a custom gown that subtly emphasized her still youthful figure. "You're here," she said, sounding almost relieved. "Good. There's been a small issue with the welcome display." "What kind of issue?" I asked, prepared for some last-minute crisis. Louise hesitated, something almost like embarrassment crossing her features. "The welcome sign still lists the Bellamy as the venue. The printer claims they never received the update, despite Vivian's insistence that she sent it." "I can handle that," I offered immediately, pulling out my phone. "Michael, the event director, can arrange a replacement within the hour." Relief flashed across Louise's face. "Would you? That would be helpful." As I stepped aside to make the call, I heard her speak quietly to Teddy. "She's quite competent, isn't she? You're Becca." "She always has been," he replied. "You just never noticed before." By the time guests began arriving in earnest, the crisis had been averted. The new welcome display not only corrected the venue name, but featured an elegantly redesigned layout that complemented the Stratford's architecture perfectly. Marcus Sr. approached us during the reception, a rare smile softening his usually stern features. "Impressive work with the venue, Rebecca. Louise tells me you were instrumental in securing the Stratford." "I had the right connections," I acknowledged modestly. "Connections Louise never bothered to explore," he noted, lowering his voice. "In 3 years, she never once asked about your business or your professional network, a significant oversight on her part." His candid assessment surprised me. "She had certain preconceptions about me." "Which you've thoroughly dismantled," he observed, raising his glass in a subtle toast. "Well done." As dinner began, I found myself seated exactly where Louise had promised, at the family table, between Teddy and Dominique, directly across from Louise herself. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone, particularly the society matrons whose curious glances kept darting our way. The moment of truth came after the main course, when Louise rose to address her guests. The room fell silent as she took her place at the microphone, resplendent in her gown and family jewels. "Thank you all for joining me on this special occasion," she began, her voice steady and practiced. "As many of you know, planning this celebration wasn't without its challenges." A knowing murmur rippled through the crowd. The Bellamy cancellation had been prime gossip fodder for days. When our original venue became unavailable, it seemed disaster had struck, Louise continued. But sometimes challenges reveal unexpected strengths within our family. She turned slightly, meeting my eyes across the table. When disaster struck with our original venue, my daughter-in-law Becca stepped in to secure the even more prestigious Stratford Hotel through her professional connections. The words, exactly as I had scripted them, rang out clearly across the ballroom. A murmur rippled through the assembled guests as Louise's words registered. Many heads turned in my direction, expressions ranging from surprise to newfound respect. I maintained a gracious smile, acknowledging the attention with a modest nod as Louise continued her speech. "In fact," she added, departing from our agreed script, "I've come to realize that Becca brings many valuable qualities to our family. Her resourcefulness in this situation merely highlighted what Theodore has clearly seen all along." Teddy squeezed my hand under the table, his eyes shining with pride and something deeper, vindication. After years of watching his mother diminish me, this public acknowledgement represented a fundamental shift in our family dynamic. As Louise concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause, Dominique leaned close to whisper, I never thought I'd see this day. Mom actually gave credit to someone else. Not just someone else, Kyle added from her other side. To the daughter-in-law she spent 3 years trying to erase. When Louise returned to the table, she carried herself with the same regal confidence she always displayed. But when our eyes met, I saw something new there. Not warmth exactly, but a clear recognition. We had reached an understanding that transcended her previous dismissal and my recent maneuvering. As the evening progressed into dancing and celebration, I found myself briefly alone at the bar when Louise approached. "Your plans exceeded expectations," she said, gesturing toward the magnificent room. "The Stratford actually suits my vision better than the Bellamy would have." "I thought it might," I replied simply. She studied me for a moment. "You know, Rebecca, in another life, we might have been allies rather than adversaries." "We still could be," I suggested. "Not best friends, perhaps, but family who respect each other's strengths." A small, genuine smile touched her lips. "I suppose stranger things have happened." She raised her champagne glass slightly. "To new understandings." I clinked my glass against hers. "To new beginnings." Later that night, as Teddy and I returned home, he pulled me into his arms in our entryway. "You were magnificent tonight. Not just for standing up to my mother, but for finding a path forward that didn't require total destruction." "That was never the goal," I explained, resting my head against his chest. "I didn't want to destroy Louise or her birthday. I wanted to change our future." "And you have," he murmured into my hair. "For the first time, I feel like we're truly partners in this marriage, facing my family together instead of me constantly caught in the middle." That night, as I drifted toward sleep in Teddy's arms, I reflected on how far we'd come. The journey had begun with a crossed-out name on an invitation, a deliberate exclusion meant to diminish me. But instead of breaking me down, Louise's action had catalyzed a transformation that none of us could have predicted. I hadn't just secured my place in the Montgomery family. I'd discovered a strength within myself that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The woman who had once swallowed her dignity for family peace had found her voice, her power, and her place. And Louise Montgomery, who had spent 60 years getting exactly what she wanted, had finally met her match. In the very woman she had tried so hard to dismiss. Her reaction, as promised in the title of our story, truly had been priceless. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.